Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. If you are joining from very far away. My name is Marie-Flore Michel, and I'm responsible for the solution unit at the Climate Action Accelerator. Thank you all for being here today and welcome to this solution workshops. The workshop will last about 2 hours. I will start by giving you a quick introduction to the Climate Action Accelerator and a couple of words about what we do. And then we will get to our topic, namely decarbonization solutions, and in particular, those relating to business travel and procurement today. We will divide into 2 small participative groups at the end of this introduction, this big introduction. One of the participative group will be about, will focus about procurement policy, and the other one about the travel policy. So depending on what you prefer, you can choose, you will be able to choose. Then we will get back all together to conclude, and I will also tell you about our knowledge and experience sharing platform a little bit. During the general presentation, I will ask you to turn off your sound and video. You will be able to activate them during the participative groups. I invite you to ask your questions in the chat, and we will be able to answer some of them just before the break into the small groups. And also maybe if there are some related to what I'm referring to, I will take them on the way. We will record this webinar and make it available on our website as replay. But the focus groups, the participative groups are not going to be recorded. So you will be able to speak as freely as possible in those groups. It won't be recorded. With that, I think we can begin. So first of all, I think we all know that we are not on the good track regarding climate change. The IPCC scientists have very recently reminded us of the global climate situation. And I invite you actually to look at the summaries of the latest reports published in February and March this year, because it's very insightful. Basically, to summarize some of the big figures, let's say, we know now that between 3.3 to 3.6 billion people, so almost half the world's population, live in contexts that are highly vulnerable to climate change. Extreme weather events are already increasing and will intensify in the coming years. There is a reduced availability of water and food resources, and this will intensify also in the coming years, especially in Africa, Asia, and small islands. The impact on health in all regions of the world is also going to increase, and effects are going to be exacerbated by poverty or limited access to services in general. So one other thing that the IPCC mentioned in these reports very recently is the consequences on food production, the rise in food prices, malnutrition, and other different things that are really associated with our sector here, the aid sector. So the scientists are warning us that we are not on the right track, and they call for a rapid, radical, and immediate action and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So we are really at a turning point, and our decisions today can ensure a livable future. So based on that I think is a good summary to start with always. I'm going to talk a little bit about our story at the Climate Action Accelerator. So basically, we are a non-profit organization based in Geneva that aims to scale up climate action within the aid sector first, but then it will be also the health and education sectors, but starting with the aid sector. The CAA, our little acronym, accompanies its partner organizations towards a radical transformation of their practices, enabling them to halve their emissions by 2030. So we have different levers. First of all, a pool of expertise and resources to really empower those organizations that really wishes to reduce their emissions. Also transform these organizations into kind of ambassadors in order to provide good examples for other organizations wishing to engage in a similar process. And then we really wish to build a global community, or help building a global community of action within the 8th sector first and also the other ones, for exchanging knowledge and solutions and experiences in order to really scale up the impact. So of course, we are not alone in that. 15 aid organizations have joined the Climate Action Accelerator and have committed to drastically reduce their emissions. So these organizations, you can have you have them on the slide. It's ICRC, Alima, Doctors Without Borders, and others. They benefit from the support of the CAA, a close accompaniment, increased visibility also in their process in their climate process, let's say, and also they really feel committed to a useful initiative, much bigger than just their organization, and also an initiative that serves the cause of the vulnerable people and the vulnerable population that they help themselves. Recently, we also partner with Race to Zero, which is a big initiative from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it allows to really have a broader exchange of solution expertise and kind of scale up the impact. So the core business of the Climate Action Accelerator is really to support these organizations in developing climate and environmental roadmaps. So setting objectives, targets, identifying actions, and assessing trajectories, action plan to reduce the emissions. So here you have, so first of all, before doing anything, usually you need to know, the first thing you need to know is what's your carbon footprint, and where are the major sources of emissions for your organization. So here you have two examples that are different in various degrees of details. It's not necessarily important for all organizations to have a very detailed carbon footprint. It can also be something very quick, very rapid. It really depends on the organizations. So here you have two examples of carbon footprints, still assumptions at this stage. So the idea is for you to see that despite the differences between the organizations, the big emissions are really often related to transport, and usually often to freight and business travel within transport, and procurement. So these are the two main sources usually of sources of emission for the aid sector. The vast majority of emissions come from there. Another example, much more detailed, this one still an assumption at this stage, is the one from Alima, another organization from the aid sector. You can see the level of detail on it, which actually allows us to really target key actions for the next step for the action plan. Overall, same thing, the emissions are mainly related to procurement and to transport. With it, business travel is also representing a big portion of it. So in general, radical and rapid reductions of emissions often relies on 5 key priority solutions. They are really, on my end, some solutions that really are impactful to reduce emissions. For Alima, this is an example for one organization. They really focused on 5 big solutions that are priorities. So one of them is about freight, shifting from air to sea. The other one is about reducing business travel. Next one, energy efficiency for vehicles. Next one, it's about procurement, environmental criteria. And the last one about renewable energy. It can be something else for different organizations, but mainly you have a couple of solutions that are really going to be impactful. The second part of the roadmap is after having in mind your carbon footprint, is to identify the solutions and to assess their effects, their potential effects. So this will allow you to have some hope about how to reduce these emissions significantly and quickly. Well, again, it's just an example here to show you what it can look like. So let's move to our topic, the solutions. So both, I'm going to present things that are both relevant and accessible for the aid organizations. So the main families, the main categories of solutions are, I'm sure you know them. The first one is about transport, the transport of people, business travel and commuting, but also freight. A big portion is about procurement. I'm going to detail those in a moment, so I'm not going to go into detail right now. Also about energy efficiency, reduction of consumption, renewable energies. There's a lot of things. Buildings, how you build, how you renovate. There's a lot of things to do there as well. And then it's about waste, circular economy, water, ecosystems. You also have solutions about digital, because it's a growing sector with a growing impact. And some things are very transversal and will allow you to really be able to implement the strategy. So let's go on our focus, business travel and procurement. So as I said before, transport and procurement really often account for more than 75% of the carbon footprint among the partners, among the aid organizations. So that's why we wanted to focus on that today, and that's also why we really want to really emphasize that in our discussions with the different partners. So this sector, business travel and procurement, and the solutions associated with them have strong impacts in climate change, but also on other things, pollution, biodiversity, the environment in general, and there is room for improvement. It's not like we cannot do anything about it. There is room for improvement on those sectors. So transport, I already mentioned, goods and people. Today we are only going to focus on business travel. Freight will be covered in another webinar, and commuting, because it's usually a really less proportion of the carbon footprint. We wanted to really focus on business travel for today. And procurement, we are talking about procurement of food, non-food items, and also medical. We wanted really to put medical aside because there's a lot of specificities associated with medical products. On procurement, it's important to look at all the phases of the product, but in general, most of the carbon impact for non-food items is related to the use of raw materials and also the manufacturing phase. So it's really important to look deeply at those two phases, along with transport. So the next slide, we wanted to think first about when you have the whole basket of solutions like that, sometimes you don't know which solutions have the greatest impact and how to prioritize, etc. It's important to kind of see which solutions has the most impact. Right now, we are going to show you a comparison of individual climate actions. So be careful, we are not talking about organizations here. We are talking about really individual actions. So the parallel is not always the same, but you can really see the different impacts for individual actions, the different impacts in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So it gives you a sense of the big picture, because sometimes we are really focused on what we are doing and we forgot about the big picture. But 2 points of attention here. First of all, when we are talking about organizations, actions, sometimes, for instance, if I take the example of the flight, at the scale of an individual, one flight, long-haul flight, will be always much more impactful than go for vegetarian, for instance, or reduce showers. But when you think about an organization, if an organization chooses, for instance, to offer one vegetarian day a week, one vegetarian day a week in its cafeteria for all its employees, of course, this significantly multiplies the associated impact of it. But it's important to have a view, a global view of the different impacts of the solutions you have. Second thing we wanted to also just give us a glimpse about is a cross-cutting issue for both procurement and transport, which is something that we need to be conscious about and cautious about as well. Palm oil, but also soy and sugar, it's a kind of similar issues because it's palm oil, for instance, it's in cooking oil, but it's in food products. It's also in hygiene and cleaning products, such as soap, and also in biofuels that are considered as climate alternatives to fossil fuels in many countries in the world. So it's really about showing you that sometimes there are things that are cross-cutting issues, and we need to be cautious about all those, because in this case, it can be also linked to a risk of deforestation. So let's go inside our first topic, business travel. So for business travel, there is really a logic of action that is associated with the impacts. The logic is first to reduce travel, because this is what has the biggest impact. It's really to reduce the travel. Secondly, it's about choosing the mode of transport. And third, about if you really have to travel by plane, to travel more responsibly, let's say. But there is a clear logic. It's not the third first and then the first. No, it's about reducing and then changing the mode of transport and then flying more responsibly. In impacts, it's really this logic. So about reduction of travel, two things, two families of solutions, let's say. One of them is about online meetings. I'm not going to comment really a lot about that, because you can build on the COVID experience, and you all know that it's something that is possible, but still has limits, of course, because we still need to meet face to face and to run an organization smoothly, especially in the aid sector. Meetings face to face and going on the field is also extremely necessary. But the point is here to find where we can actually do online meetings, where we can build on the experience of COVID-19 to actually not do what we did before, to change, to adapt, and to reduce our emissions. One question that is asked frequently is, yes, but are you sure that the digital footprint is really low, and that actually reduce flying and go to online meeting is something that we should do? Yes, of course, the digital sector has an impact, and the impact is growing. But if you compare really a return flight Paris-Geneva, which is short, I'm not talking about Paris-New York, return flight Paris-Geneva in economy class, compared to a 4-hour video conference, you can see on the slide that really the figures are really in favor of choosing online meeting. And there is no question about it. The second thing I wanted to mention is about grouping trips, having multi-purpose trips, like a business trip with a training, with something else, like grouping and multi-purpose, that really can reduce emissions. I'm going to give you an example there. The ones from the company, a French company called Nature et Découverte. They replaced their 1 to 2 day session of training that used to take place several times a year with a single week-long training course that only takes place once a year for everyone. And actually, with only that, this action, they were able to reduce their CO2 emissions linked to training by 40%, just by doing that. So sometimes it's also about rethinking things, not really reinventing the wheel and finding a new technology, but rethinking the processes. So next, I'm going to go very quickly on that because I'm sure you all know taking a train is much less emissive than taking a plane. So when it's possible, we should do that. We should encourage that. In Europe, for instance, there is a lot of possibilities, a lot of room for improvement. It's not the case everywhere. So of course, it's not about installing trains where no trains exist, but where it exists, favor it. And again, my example with Nature et Découverte, the French company, they changed the training location, again about training, from a place really easily accessible by car and plane to a place really easily accessible by train. And they actually were able to reduce by 45% the number of people coming by plane in favor of train, and of course the associated emissions. So again, there is room for improvement for a lot of organizations. And the third thing is about travel more responsibly when a flight is really necessary. So there are different things that you can do on that an organization can do. Fly economy, because it's really not the same to fly economy or to fly first class or business class. You can also take direct flights, because actually an aircraft consumes the most fuel during the takeoff phase because of the gravity. So the more direct flights you take without stopovers, the better in terms of climate. And then you can choose airlines more carefully, because some airlines are really involved into the climate change reduction targets, really involved, more involved than others. It means they renew their fleets of aircraft to have more fuel efficient aircraft. It means they are really pursuing green taxiing with some electrical cars tracking the plane. They are reducing the weight on board. They are also using alternative fuels. There are a lot of different things. So it's also good to support airlines that are doing a better job than others on that topic. So let's go to procurement now. So about procurement, there are 3 key elements of a procurement strategy. First is to find alternatives, so less emissive alternatives. Second is about criteria, put in place criteria that in contracts, for instance, or in terms of specification for key products, or with the suppliers. So and then after criteria, it's really there is a continuous day-to-day process to have with the suppliers. It's to be able to engage the supplier in this reduction approach, in their manufacturing, in the products, in many things. But that's really an exchange and a discussion that we need to have with suppliers. So first topic is about alternatives. So on the alternatives, first thing is to analyze the carbon impact of the products you are buying. So identify the high emissive products and the products that you are buying in large quantities. So with these 2 things, you will be able to prioritize, because it's a reality thing. You won't be able to cover 100% of the products you are buying from start. You need to start somewhere, and it's good to start with the priorities. So then you can identify products with lower emissions. So either in relation to production, for instance, you can replace rice with less emissive cereals, or during the use of some products. For instance, using ovens reduce the energy and the wood used by 80%, and thus emissions associated with it. So it's different things, but they are alternatives. Then you can also consider a supplier or a sourcing country that can provide an equivalent product, but less emissive. For instance, in some countries, some products will be produced with renewable energies. In some other countries, it will be produced with fossil fuels energy. So this really has a different impact in terms of the of the carbon footprint of the product. And then finally, before making any decision, request a carbon footprint of the alternative product you are considering. This will really guarantee that you are not doing any bad choice, let's say. Then one other very, very strong pillar is it's about environmental criteria. It starts very early in the process. It's really, really before choosing any supplier, or when you are renewing suppliers, it's really before this. It's including environmental criteria as a selection criteria for those suppliers within awarding contracts. So next to price and quality. So you won't choose a supplier only with price and quality, but also thanks to environmental criteria. And this starts really early in the process. Then you can define specifications for key products with the supplier. So for instance, for clothes, you can specify in your contract with the supplier that you want a certain percent of the materials that are coming from recycled materials, or you want some labels to be used for some products, this kind of thing. It's about specifications. And then you can also ask suppliers and work with them to make sure that they provide long-lasting products, because a product that only lasts 5 years, it's not the same in terms of climate change with a product that lasts 20 years, for instance. And there is a whole really continuous process to have with the suppliers, supplier engagements and suppliers that are really involved in this. Then purchasing regional or local, buy local and regional. On this, there are 2 points of attention. First of all, there is a difference between buying local products locally and buying locally products that are produced very, very far away. So first, be cautious about that. And second, a local product produced locally, fabricated locally, does not necessarily mean that this product is less emissive than your initial product. Because for instance, it's really, again, about the example of the renewable energy and fossil fuel. If the product was fabricated with renewable energy, then it can be really less emissive than with fossil fuel. It really depends on that. And then something that is really very, 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 very important is to engage with suppliers to decarbonize their production. And that's a very continuous process, everyday kind of process. We need to involve the suppliers in the discussion and to incentivize them the more we can on this. What we can also do is public recognition, because it's good for them to be publicly recognized as going on as being on the good track in terms of climate action. So social media, reports, case studies, this kind of thing. You can also establish long-term contracts, so it allows for greater planning, security for those suppliers, to make sure that they will be able to live for several years. You can also pay them more, of course, because if they have better products, you can pay them more. And basically that's very, very important pillars for them. So now we are going to have a couple of minutes for questions and answers. I saw that some of them were in the chat. I will give the floor to my colleague Sonia, who will pick and choose the question. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marie-Flore. Hello, everyone. My name is Sonia. I'm a solution manager at the Climate Action Accelerator, specifically focusing on procurement. And I'd also encourage you to well, either raise your hand or put your questions in the chat. We have around 15 minutes to answer any questions you might have before we break up into discussion groups. So we have one question regarding business travel, which is, do you have a list of these more seriously engaged airlines? So what you mentioned, Marie-Flore, regarding that they are more eco-responsible airlines.
Yes, that's a very good question. So at the Climate Action Accelerator, we are not we are not producing those kind of lists, but those kind of lists exist. They were developed by some environmental NGOs specialized in transport and environment. And so there are mainly 2 or 3 organizations doing that: Transport and Environment, TNE, and ICCT is another one. And those lists, we are going to put them on our platforms as tools to be used or not by the organization. It's really a choice. And they really provide some useful insights on different airlines and also different aircrafts. But it's done by TNE, and the other one is ICCT. And it's going to be on our platform.
And then Maya raised her hand. You can unmute yourself.
Thanks for that, and thanks so much for the presentation here. I'm working as a regional cash and voucher assistance coordinator for IFSC in the Africa region, and one of the things that is coming up within cash and voucher assistance is, of course, also looking at local markets or looking at comparison between delivering in-kind assistance and giving people cash to go and access what they need from local markets themselves. And I'm really struggling with the issue of us looking at what are actually the most vulnerable and poorest parts of the population buying, because their climate footprint is so low already. So I'm just wondering if, like, what kind of thoughts have you had around working with the side of humanitarian assistance, which is looking at cash and voucher assistance? I'd always go back and encourage that we look more at the markets, but I think the entry point for that with more locally based vendors is still quite challenging, because they might also not be in a position to actually do a lot about changing their supply chains. Plus, we work in quite rapid programs, so it's difficult for us to also get in early and do the kind of work with them. So I'm just wondering if you have any reflections on this. I'd be very happy to learn from the experience you have working with the aid sector already. Thanks a lot.
I'm happy to take the question, Marie-Flore. So indeed, it's a tricky issue, the question of cash distribution. I think the one generic, it's not really an answer, but one point on it is we would disencourage organizations to use switching from actual distribution of items or food towards cash as a means to reduce their carbon footprint. As specifically, as you mentioned, you have much less influence over what is bought when it's just distributed cash. One option, and again for us, it's also very early in the discussion, so I don't have a perfect answer for you at the moment. But one element we discussed was also to consider using rather vouchers than actual cash distribution, to have some sort of influence over from whom is bought. But yeah, we're also just at the beginning when it comes to the question of vouchers or cash distribution. And happy to exchange further on the topic one-on-one to also see looking into more detail what your experiences are and the specific challenges. Thanks.
Great, thanks a lot. I'd be very happy to engage in a one-on-one with you.
Perfect. Then we have one more question in the chat. What would be the difference between a life cycle analysis and the life cycle costing? Marie-Flore, do you want to take the question?
That's a very specific question. So first of all, I'm not an expert on that. So one thing I can, but we have a colleague expert in that. So first of all, I can come back to you with a very, very precise answer if you want. Then what I understood, it's two different things. Life cycle costing is to assess the costs of a product through its whole life, but the cost associated with the product. The life cycle as analysis, it's about analyzing the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions during the whole life of the product. Same thing, the whole life, but it's more focused on emissions. And LCC, it's more focused on the costs. What I can say about life cycle analysis, it's that it's very important to look at products with using this approach, actually, because if you just look at the user at the user phase, you will avoid most of the emission associated with the products. So it's a very important approach to follow the life cycle analysis. I don't know, Sonia, if you know more about the LCC.
No, same. I'm not an expert on these questions. Sorry.
Okay. Is there any other question?
There is none in chat. Anyone else who wants to ask any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. Give you 10 more seconds to raise your hands. Okay, then I would propose we move on, Marie-Fleur.
Yes, sure. So it will. And if you have more questions after that, we will also be happy to answer them. So then this is the moment when we are going to split between to talk about the travel policy and the procurement policy. But first, we wanted to explain to you a little bit why we are focusing on that today, about policies. Because for us, policies are really the major tools for driving climate action throughout the organization, for sometimes formalizing structural changes, such as the ones that we needed to have during the COVID period. So it's a moment to formalize things, and systemizing best practices that are sometimes already being done by some individuals within the organization or some departments. So these tools are really important to set rules for everyone, common framework for all the staff, and to really generalize bold actions and things that are already being done within the organization. It provides transparency, equity, a feeling of ownership to a bigger movement about climate change, amplification, impact. It's really a major tool, and we really strongly advise to start with that, with the policies. And then, of course, it's not enough. We need tools, awareness raising, processes in place for implementation. We need to work with travel agencies, suppliers, etc. But policies are really key. So on that, we would like to ask you to choose one of our breakout rooms. So you will see at the bottom of your screen, you have an icon, a breakout room. You can click on it, and you will be able to join either business travel or procurement. You can choose, and no problem if you did a mistake, you can go to the other one. Once you are in a breakout room, you can change if possible. So I invite you to choose and to join one of the two groups, either business travel or procurement. Business travel, we are going to talk about a travel policy. Procurement, we will talk about a procurement policy. So it's really your choice. You can choose. We invite you to click on breakout rooms, either business travel to talk about travel policy, or procurement to talk about the procurement policy. The little icon is at the bottom of your screen. You can see in the black Zoom, you have breakout rooms. You click on breakout rooms, and then you see business travel or procurement. For the remaining participants, the choice is yours. I leave you with my colleague Carmen, and I'm going to join the business travel right now, and Sonia the procurement. See you soon, and Carmen, please help the others if they need help. Thanks. question. Sonia in the travel breakout room just asked a question. So I'm just going to reply to her directly into the travel. I think it's a good idea. I think all ideas, first of all, are good and they depend on the context of your organization. But you raise a good point that if you set this requirement, maybe everyone will just go with the requirement. Which one organization, one of the university I mentioned is really going within each department and setting targets. So they have the same travel policy for everyone, but they are setting targets, reduction targets per departments based on what they have already achieved and based on what they want to achieve. So maybe differentiating the travel policy, I don't know if I would go for that, but at least differentiating, the different departments, the goals for the different departments. That's something that is a good practice that is already being done by others. And I will stop there.
Thank you.
So welcome back to our main room. Thanks for being so participative in our participative groups. I will now give the floor to the secretary of both groups to give us a little feedback of the discussions and of the discussions. Let's start with procurement.
So the secretary is me again, Marie-Flore. So we had a more detailed discussion around procurement and specifically on selection of suppliers and the possibility to put specific criteria for suppliers in place that they have to also decarbonize their business and put in place a carbon reduction plan. We started off with a little feedback round on the three circles of procurement. I will show them to everyone again. So I was asking if this sort of makes sense to participants. And one very interesting point that was raised there is that we should also consider whenever we change products or specifications, we also need to consider the acceptation of end users. So is this, the product might be have a lower carbon impact, but if it's not used by the end user for various reasons, it will not be useful. And also a point on possibly including a dimension of regarding collaboration and research, which might be needed to also find these type of alternatives. So I thought that was very useful to have sort of some feedback on the way we organized the criteria regarding procurement. And then when it comes to the question of putting in place selection criteria for suppliers. So whilst it was sort of overall considered as something that can be useful and in this sort of a strategy for achieving the emission targets, there were a couple of points of attention that were raised, notably regarding the contexts aid organization work, where it could often be difficult to find suppliers that actually do comply and that are able to put in place, well, first of all, calculate their emissions and then put in place a carbon reduction plan. Regarding to that, we also discussed, maybe it needs to be, suppliers need to be segmented, either regarding their size or regarding the categories they supply. Then another point that was discussed was regarding the overall engagement with suppliers. So some participants shared that the engagement with suppliers that is already ongoing for example, changing some of the specifications is usually very positive. So these type of discussions. What else? Let me just check my notes. And then in the end, there were also a couple of good practice examples that were shared and that we can put on the on the sharing platform to make available to more organizations in the sector to basically disseminate information that is already out there. And I will let anyone who participated in the group complete if I forgot anything. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, and thanks to the participants for their inputs.
Thanks a lot, Sonia, and all the procurement participants. I will give the floor to the Secretary of the Travel Policy, Cyril.
Yes, I'm here, but I think I cannot put my video, so sorry, you will have only the sound. So on behalf of the travel group, of course, discuss several good examples. I mean, the main topic, of course, was this balance between like moving online instead of traveling. Many examples and concrete things about developing or adjusting the travel policies. We talked quickly about carpooling for travels that are within Europe, mainly the promotion of the train against the flight, although very different policies. Is it 5 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours? To whom does it apply? And some discrepancies with that as well, like some exceptions that are made sometimes. Of course, to prefer the direct route, as it was explained, although it triggers the question about the cost against, you know, like the CO2 footprint reduction. Some colleagues shared that some practices that are good are not always in writing. So a little back to the question of the policy. Some agencies were also doing this analysis on the direct versus indirect cost and how can they overcome the question of value for money. That is a lot in the air with, has always been with donors. We've talked about like kind of carbon budget or like limitation quotas of trips per department or like per year. Colleagues share about promoting seed funding to trigger department or actions from departments to move in the right direction to feed like those potential extra costs linked to reducing carbon footprint. In terms of we had also like the illustration of banning or reallocating miles systematically to the organization and not to the individuals, let's say. And we discussed like the link with the HR management policies, the potential longer missions, longer stay of people or visit, the adjustment to holidays policy. In terms of issue, of course, main issue that was repeated several times, the question of change habits, change behavior. Second topic that was quite clear, the question of the value for money. Like we always have this trend to prefer the economic criteria over the social and the environmental. And this is most of the time reinforced by the donors approach. Although we have discussed that some donors are moving into the right direction, and some actually non-usual donors are opening their funds to those greening initiatives. And very practical issues that were faced as well. For example, we want to book flights, direct flights, so agencies have to try to plan the movement way ahead. So it triggers, you know, difficulties in planning and having people engage into their travel plan a lot before what they used to do. In terms of issue, although it's the big #1 solution, the go online versus the physical, we discuss a little the dilemma here about this exponential increase of digital footprint, digital CO2 footprint. And finally, we have also discussed sometimes the difficulty to have like the walking the talk of the policies. And in terms of success factor on this point, what was highlighted is the importance to promote, let's say, both the bottom-up and the top-down approach. So both promoting the initiative from people and individuals, but at the same time ensuring that there are policies and that things are set in stone and that there is a political willingness to do things. In terms of behavioral change, it was like about incentivizing change of the people, the colleagues, and yeah, and I think that's it. Thank you to the group, and if I miss something, please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Cyril. I think it's very, very exhaustive. You covered everything that we discussed, or nearly everything. Thanks again to all the participants of the breaking rooms, the participative groups. It was very good to be able to discuss and exchange a little bit with you. Let's go now back to our presentation, because we wanted to show you another pillar of our action, which is our platform, our sharing platform. So it's not launched yet. It will be launched in June, but it's really important for us, as you understood. It's one of the reasons for being, let's say, at the Climate Action Accelerator. It's really important for us to share the knowledge and experience and to build upon good practices, good operational practices within people that share the same kind of ways of working and the same goals within the aid organization, to be able to build upon that to kind of amplify the movement. So the platform will be a platform of to share knowledge, experiences, solutions, roadmaps, tools, many different things, articles, case studies, different things. It will be free of charge. It will be accessible to all. And our aim is to build a community of practice with this for high and low income countries, to make the knowledge accessible to everyone as much as possible, to learn from each other, from the different organizations that are really in the same sector, so with the same ways of working usually and the same goals. In our share, so these are the visuals in French, but it will also be in English. It will be both available in English and available in French. This is the kind of visual of the platform that will be launched in June, with solutions, with stakeholders, with different things. You will be able to get different types of information, some solutions in the type of playing cards with different colors. Then you also will be able to have a sharing community with the different partners involved in CAA. We also some kind of training and amplification strategy information about that. There will be information about some events, some training, some webinars specific on some different topics. Let's say one webinar on freight, for instance, or one webinar on renewable energy. Again, within the limits of the partners we are helping, we are supporting. Then in terms of content, there will be solution fact sheets to deepen some specific topics, such as flying in economy class and many other different topics, many of our different solutions. Articles that allow to go really into the detail of a successful experience. For instance, for Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, they really shift from aerial freight to maritime freight, and that's a really good example for others. And also other tools and documents that will be online. On the solution fact sheets, so one of the documents, one of the content, you will find a description of the topic, of the issues at stake, key figures, key actions, key tools, example of successful experiences, different things that we hope will be useful to you. So basically, the platform, as I said, will be launched in June and will be accessible to all. There will be more and more content as time goes by. So if you come back 6 months later, you will see more content, more tools, more fact sheets, this kind of thing. As you can see, at the Climate Action Accelerator, we have a very, very inclusive approach. So don't hesitate to tell us about your needs, the solutions that are working for you, the good examples that you have. We will be delighted to learn and to share it for the whole for the whole sector, and to support if we can also. And finally, we want to let you know as well that we work with volunteers that are providing a couple of hours to write an article or to do some research, to help with the communication, for many different things. So if you are interested, or if you know people that are interested to support this approach and this movement, don't hesitate to call us or to send us an email. And last, that's the different contact details, the website, the LinkedIn. There's also Instagram, I think. So if you have any questions or if you want to reach out, just send an email. So on that, and I think, yeah, Sonia provided her email in the chat. If you are really interested into procurement, yes, Sonia is the right person. You can directly send an email to her. And my name it's also the same kind of format with my name for different things related to solutions. But in any case, send an email to Zaninka and we will definitely have it. So on that note, are there any other questions before we close this webinar? No, I don't think so. Please raise your hand or put it in the chat if you have a last-minute question.
Marie-Fleur, would you be able to put down your email address in the chat as well?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
So Sonia, can you put it if you have it, or let me?
I just couldn't remember if there's a slash between Marie and Fleur. Sorry.
I actually even don't remember my email address anyway. I'm putting it right now. So accelerator.org. Should be that. Okay, so on that note, I would like to thank all the participants for being here with us today, for exchanging during the participative rooms. And I also would like to thank all the CAA team, Sonia, Carmen, Pierre, Estelle, many others that contributed to this presentation and to the work of CAA. So thank you again. Please don't hesitate to call us, to send us an email if you want to share anything with us, a good practice, or if you need any support from us. We are here to try to amplify the movement. So thanks again and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.